There we go. Hello, everyone. Um,
Hey, hey.
Let us know if you can hear us and everything. Are we good?
Yeah. I think,
Okay, I'm making you a
yeah,
bit. I'm
I think
making.
we're good, but
Okay,
it's weird. I'm just reloading. Just see.
no worries.
It hasn't
It's not streaming.
no on this thing on my preview thing it still shows just the opening slide. Did you switch us over?
Oh, did I not yet? Oh, here. Oh,
Yeah.
is this better? Are we good now? I think. Maybe there's a bit of a lag. Awesome. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 12 of the G5A Virtual Cinema Club. Um, so we did two films by director Edward Yang from Taiwan, um, and
Taipei story.
Taipei Story and EE. Um, yeah, and I guess we can start diving into both the films.
Yeah, I mean we can just like start with I guess Taipei story and then get into Yi because I think just in terms of I mean just the length of it,
Mm-hmm.
um, it kind of just made I mean, they're both like long-ish films, right? And then,
Yeah.
uh, but I think one sort of feels very different um, in some sense, even though it is the longer one. Weirdly, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I felt. I mean, let's just dive into Taipei story, and then we can talk.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
just generally, I think what is very interesting that he does as a filmmaker is just like each film kind of has its own like internal clock or like a heartbeat or whatever you want to call it, a rhythm to it.
mhm.
And I think he plays to the strengths of each one based on what the story is and based on what he's trying to say. I haven't seen any of his
Yeah,
other
yeah,
films. Obviously, we've only seen these two, but I'd be curious to see, how he kind of does that with the other films that he's done. I think I think a lot of times, like, kind of, it doesn't feel like he's repeating himself in terms of like the way he even shoots things or the framing or, all these
yeah,
aspects of filmmaking. I feel like each time it's kind of this completely new, it feels refreshing, I feel like, from film to film,
yeah.
at least between these two.
I mean, I think you know what was particularly striking, which I was thinking about while watching the films, but I get like I wasn't able to articulate it until a little while ago. It's just that I mean, I think when you look at I guess different or like maybe more conventional films, that there's a lot of like exposition that happens for the
Mm-hmm.
sake of audiences and viewers, which I feel like he didn't do
Mm-hmm.
in either of the films, and it was very much as if you were just a part, like you were just watching the lives of these people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sort
Yeah.
of like you were privy to a couple of these moments, um, but you were sort of supposed to like have all of this background information,
Yeah, you're
right? Like
kind
I
of.
think in Taipei story, in Taipei story, like I think with all the relationships that are there, like very few of them are like explained beyond the point of like what the character would need to know, or you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some at least I mean that also might be in the subtitles and sort of like how it's sort of translated. Like it might like if you're watching it in if you're able to understand the language, it you might pick up on sort of some specific colloquial cues, um, that sort of might enlighten sort of what that like what a particular relationship is. But like I think for the most part, I was confused or just like unsure about like the two like protagonist or the main characters,
Yeah.
right, in Taipei story, Chin and
Lung.
Long. Yeah, and as to the like what their relationship actually was,
Mm.
right, and then how I mean you sort of I mean you get it, right, but it's just it was kind of an interesting thing where it wasn't
It was very
it
complex.
wasn't yeah, it was like very complicated, but it wasn't sort of like oversimplified in its explanation
Mm.
to us as
Mm.
viewers, which I thought was really like interesting. It was something that like I hadn't seen before in like either where like whether it's films or even books that I'm reading. Like there is a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
exposition that happens where like it sort of sets the context. And I'm like, okay, I know all of these the different like relationships, sort of the interconnection between the characters, and now the story begins.
Yeah. 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 No, it's like, I mean, yeah, like what I understood from it is that they were like childhood friends, and then it's like, I guess he was dating her really close friend at some point, who then like, I don't. That's the thing, is like some of these things in between, they were a little bit, I won't say complicated, but they were just like, you're figuring it out as you're going, and you're kind of reaching around to figure
Yeah.
it out. And then, but then you
Hmm.
see like kind of like through the relationship, like who these characters really are as well. Um,
Yeah.
and I think like it has to do with like the modernization that kind of took place in Taiwan and stuff. And I think like if you think about it, it's Lung's character where he's kind of, you could say, rooted in the old ways, so to speak, or like just kind of not, I don't want to say stuck in the past necessarily, but I mean kind of, I guess.
But sort
um
of, yeah, yeah.
and I
Because I
think,
mean, he goes off with in that bar, right? Like
mm-hmm,
when the other that guy says, "Oh, like you missed so badly or whatever that like didn't you play baseball?"
mm,
And then sort of like that just sort of like sets him off, and it's like a bit of a trigger, right?
yeah. Also just like the way he, it's like, you kind of see that Chin and her father's relationship is a little bit damaged, and they're not like as close as, like, in fact it almost feels like Lung is closer to Chin's father than Chin
Yeah,
is. And the way
yeah,
he
absolutely.
helps him out and stuff. And I think that kind of like is that like the idea of respect, and like, like I think he really respects him, and I think that also has to like kind of starts to lean into that, the ways of the old, I guess. And then you have Chin on
Yeah,
the other
I mean,
hand.
which is yeah, which is I mean, which is interesting because like you hear about. I mean, that's one of the things that you do hear about it. Like, there's more telling in this
Hmm.
scenario rather than sort of the more showing that we see with all the other
Yeah.
information. But it's where we're explicitly told about sort of the stressed relationship that Chin's
Yeah.
parents have, and they've been sort of more how it's been a more like old school or like a traditional
Hmm.
um, relationship, right, between a man and a woman. And I mean, I think that's one of the so that I think that sort of like really emphasizes
Hmm.
that fact. And then it's also interesting when I guess seemingly Lung knows about it, but he doesn't. Um,
Like
it
address
doesn't
it.
affect him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or like doesn't affect how he's reacting or like interacting with Chin's
Hmm.
dad.
Absolutely. And also I think like it's interesting because then you have like Chin on the other hand, where she's like working, she's kind of living on her own, and you kind of start to see that like modernization of Taipei
Yeah,
through her lens, I guess, or through her character. Um, and what I found really fascinating, and there's a lot of like elements that kind of start to point towards that, right? Starting with like her searching out a new home for herself. And I mean, that's also kind of, it reminds me of Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, where the middle child kind of
yeah,
started like
exactly.
looking for her own apartment and like that independence from the family unit, and trying to get away. But then I think you also like see something very interesting when at the end of the film, um, Lung is the one who rejects the idea of marriage, as in like,
Yeah.
and she's the one who kind of is seeking it out and trying to like fix things over and all of that. And it's kind of like almost like a r- flip of, like it's a role reversal in that moment in a way, um
Absolutely.
almost, which I thought was really interesting. um yeah.
And I mean, I think also just when I started watching it, I think it was just it was so visually striking as well,
Hmm.
and I think, I mean, that's such a huge, like, it there was just sort of like, I don't know, I mean, it was just like a particular like color range or something, uh, that sort of just added uh, to the story,
Yeah.
like, I mean, I don't want to say it was kind of like, it sort of added it like a touch of like melancholy, but like that's sort of what it feels like,
Hmm. Yeah,
just in a
it's, I
way.
guess, somber would be the word, maybe. It just,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, a little bit,
um
sort of like that, like that bluish green
hmm, hue.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I think the visuals, I think, um even just the pacing of the filmmaking, I think it's very like meditative in a way. It's very like, and
yeah,
like there's not like, like even in a conversation sequence, or a scene, there's not a lot of like cutting back and forth between the dialogue,
yeah,
even, a simple dialogue scene. It's very, a lot of it takes place in two shots oftentimes. um and you don't, yeah, there's no like rush anywhere, and that's
mhm.
like kind of a
Also,
relief.
I feel like kind of in like moments, it's very like, um, the camera is very still,
Hmm.
right? And you
Yeah.
see it's sort of just placed in one spot, and then like like characters similar to Tokyo Story,
Hmm.
right? Characters like move in and out of it, and
Yeah.
it's almost as if like we were there in the room, and like that's our sort of like field of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think that was also, yeah. Did you want to pull up some stills maybe
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we kind of took?
I think
I
I can
might
do that.
walk
I've
through
got
with them.
them. So yeah, just 1 second. Let me see. So I think, I mean, what's interesting is that so I think like both of us, just to give some context, like both of us sort of like stopped and took some screenshots, while watching the film. And what's interesting is that we have similar ones, right? There's a few that
Oh, cool.
are the same. Um, and so I'm just going to. All right, can you see?
Yeah, I can see that. Yep, there we go. Got it. Oh yeah, this was a
Cool.
great.
So I mean, yeah, I think this was like one of the first sort of, um like opening. I don't think it was the opening scene, but it was sort of like, I remember it being like a really striking one where I sort of stopped, and I think this is just when, actually, if I show you the next one, this is
Hmm.
just when the title comes up, and I thought it was just like really, like I just really liked it a lot,
Hmm. Yeah, I know what you mean.
and then I think the next one was super interesting as well, because it just sort of changed it entirely, but it's the same frame almost. um,
Yeah.
right, it's at the end of the credits, and it's just like the room sort of animated, and now like
Yeah.
is
Also,
lived in, right, which I think, is an interesting transition.
yeah.
It's just sort of like it's such a simple way to just showcase like, oh, she's moved in already,
Yeah.
you know
Also very
um
very Tokyo Story-esque in a way, with like the lines being
yeah,
so like, vertical, sorry, vertical or horizontal. Like, it's
mhm,
very, sorry, yeah, just very Ozu-esque, in terms of framing and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. And then this one also is, I
Yeah.
didn't take the empty one, but this is just sort of like the beginning scene where you see them, Chin and
Hmm.
Longa, like checking out this apartment, right? And then this is sort of one of the frames that we see, and then this is the one when it's sort of, once she's moved in and she's got paintings and,
Yeah.
um
Also, I think
This is
she's
the room that she.
isn't this the shot where she's talking
Uh,
to someone and you just see the shadows moving in the background? Yeah.
yeah. Exactly.
Such a
That's
clever
it.
way
Right.
of just, doing kind of
Yeah.
doing
Right here.
two things at once, like showing
Two
a
things at
space
once. Yeah.
and showing a scene.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and then this was one, but I'm just to show your um,
Mhm.
images. So this one was really interesting that you sent.
Yeah.
Um, do you wanna like take us through it?
Yeah, we can. It's just like a very interesting perspective of a scene that takes place in a car. Something I'd never really seen before. Like either you're like outside the car and you're seeing the full car from behind, or you're like, kind of in
Hmm.
the car and seeing the characters as if you're in the back seat. I've never seen a shot where they put the camera on the trunk. And kind of you're like close enough but also like far in some sense, something very yeah, just something. It's I don't know, I still haven't like figured out what this shot means in a sense, or like what what he's trying to achieve, but I just think it was just very unique. I've never seen it before, at least as far as I can
Yeah.
remember.
No, I think same. To be honest, like I it's something that like again I think it adds to that aspect of like us almost being there, right? Like
Hmm.
this could be. I mean, it's not because you can see like you're outside the car, but like you could be in the back seat here,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And you could be seeing all of this, like the traffic ahead, the traffic on the side, two
And it's like
passengers
a
in front of you.
pretty wide shot too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I think this one,
Mm.
this is sort of a set. There's this and then this one, sort of like working together.
Yeah. I mean, just the idea of a two
Um,
shot. I mean, even the sense of light, like, the light's not really, it's like
yeah,
chopped off at his neck and then it really hits her. I
and
think,
then this is like shadow over here as well.
hmm, yeah,
Is amazing.
yeah. Just very, and again, like very Ozu-esque too. It's like, you have your two characters kind of in the center of the frame. Um, and, one sitting, one standing. It's fairly wide. Um,
Yeah,
there's something very, um, yeah, there's something very like, I think it's like you're close enough to get all the information you want, but then you're also far enough to see the surroundings.
yeah, and then also I think like we feel this like distance between them, right? Even though they are quite close,
Hmm.
you can feel sort of that distance in this moment that they're experiencing,
Yeah.
right? And sorry, and similarly here as well, I think.
Yeah, this one, they're on like the other one, they have the table as like a physical thing between them. Here, they're like on the other sides of the frame, like more towards the edges.
Yeah,
I think,
and then there's the light. At least from our point of view, the light and
yeah,
the that small like side table
yeah,
is in between. Right?
yeah. And this was the scene where she finds out, or like, like she's found out that he went to Japan and kind of confronts him,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
So like you kind of see that even kind of the power dynamic, and she's like, even in the previous one, she's sitting, he's standing. Um,
Yeah,
I
but
think
he's the one that always sort of like feels
in
like it feels like
control.
he's a bit helpless in
Yeah.
this. Which is kind of interesting
Hmm.
because you would imagine it to be the other way based on how, like, if you just assume sitting versus standing, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty
And
awesome.
then there was this one that we
Hmm.
both had,
Yeah.
which I think was just like a very like this could just be an image, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it could be a photograph, and I think it would be so incredible.
Yeah. Just the sense of light, like kind of streaming in,
Hmm.
but then it's like, you have the two characters. It's also just like feels like a very different space compared to like the other spaces we've seen in the film. Sorry, did I lose you?
No, no, no.
Oh yeah,
Say that again.
no, I was saying it feels like a little bit of a different space compared to the other spaces we've seen. This kind of feels a little more. I mean, with the red and gold things to the left, like I don't know if they're trophies or what they are. I think they're trophies, right?
Yeah, I think it is.
And
Yeah,
then there's like that like
I think
it
they're baseball trophies.
yeah, and it seems like there's like the altar up above it that's like kind of perched or whatever or something. Maybe like
Mm,
a religious thing.
yeah.
So I think it's like that's the thing. It's like that idea of like switching back and forth between tradition. Like this feels, and we saw this in Eat Drink Man Woman too. Like the house is like a single story house, ground floor, um, kind of
Hmm.
like and then like you have the other part of Taipei, which is like building up, I guess, and like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
modernizing. And I think you start to see that like even with the nature of the light, how it's like coming in like early morning, late evening, or late afternoon. It's like more horizontal, so it's like kind of puts you closer to the ground. I feel in a way.
yeah. No, I mean, I think like just the way the sort of light is on the screen
Hmm.
is is amazing. Like it just sort of like draws you in and is like incredibly captivating.
Yeah, and also interestingly, he plays kind of like with the composition through light, like in terms of how he illuminates the scene. It's like composition obviously is just like the framing, but also like the angle at which the light is at in a way that beam of light on the wall like immediately draws your
Hmm.
eyes to Lung. So like compositionally also
Yeah.
like the light serves a compositional purpose, which is really
I mean,
cool.
I think you're just building on what you're saying. Is like your eye is drawn here, right, to
Yeah,
this sort of
exactly,
box,
exactly.
and then sort of like from there you start exploring the rest of the
Hmm.
frame.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's one thing we didn't like talk about necessarily in the cinematography like talk, but like that's something you could
Yeah.
obviously do, right? Like like compositionally, like obviously you can decide where you want to put the camera physically, but you can also build composition through light by like creating those patches
Yeah,
of light,
yeah.
which I think is really cool.
And I guess also just sort of using the elements around you, right? Like once
Yeah.
you, I guess, setting that scene, and then um,
Hmm.
like have like basically the camera placement is sort of one of the different variables that you can play with, right?
Hmm.
And like I
Absolutely.
mean we've spoken about blocking a bunch,
Yeah.
but I think this is sort of light. I think even, I mean, to some extent, like even color
Yeah, I was actually gonna say that.
comes into play,
Yeah.
right? Because then like depending on what um like the way different like choices you make in terms of like clothing color, wall color, prop color, all of that sort
Yeah.
of frames your like or sort of influences how your eyes take in the frame.
Exactly. So like I mean even in this image, right? Like if you look at it, I think what he's done really interesting is it's like a very like bluish green tint to most of it. You
Hmm.
have a bit of warmth here, but then you have like a whole bunch of like hints of red interspersed throughout the frame, like these
Yeah,
bottles, the trophy, this I guess it's like a fly swatter maybe or something. The
it is. Yeah,
yeah,
it is. And the curtain as well.
and then this little like
And this is
thing here.
this bag as
Yeah.
well that I'm seeing
Yeah,
now.
exactly. So I mean, it's like the red is kind of like I mean, just the idea of having red like kind of interspersed throughout the frame. It doesn't feel like
Yeah.
it's like if you didn't do it as much, I feel like it could almost feel like a mistake, something too obvious. But like the way it's done, it's like
Hmm.
throughout, and it's so like it's not big and in
Yeah,
your
I mean
face.
there is like a consistency to it
Hmm.
that that feels intentional.
And like a balance to it. Like
You know.
I mean, even this
Yeah.
yellow that you have on the window, and then like the gold on the left. There's a sense of
Exactly.
balance to
I was
everything.
just gonna say that like that sort of like there is that like intent, and then also this packet up here is sort of
Hmm.
yellowish as well.
True. True.
Um,
Yeah, because like I feel like on a set, like normally you'd like be like, okay, yeah, whatever, what's that yellow paper? Like, get it out of the frame, But like for
yeah,
this, it
yeah,
works,
absolutely.
Um, and I think that's really interesting. Cool.
And then let's see, what was the next one that you had? Is that it?
I think so. That's the last one I had. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
And then so I had this one, and then I had this as well. And then similarly, I had this. This was such an interesting scene. Also,
Hmm.
now I'm just remembering it. I mean, they walk in, right, and then they're sort of like in darkness,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she doesn't turn the light on,
Yeah.
right, and then it's sort of like they talk, and I was trying to I thought about taking a screenshot, but like there was nothing, like you could barely see his silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was all that you could see.
Yeah.
And then they were having that conversation, and then you feel like, I think he goes closer to her,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like, okay, maybe they're gonna, like make up, or there's gonna be some sort of like resolution to this.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what he just does is he just goes and turns the light on,
Yeah.
right? And that sort of is it's the opposite. Like, it sort of just like doubles down on this like tension that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Kind of
and
it's
then
like
that,
shining a light on it in that moment,
yeah, yeah, exactly,
like quite
exactly.
literally. Yeah. No, I think that's also like very interesting, and I think that's like this is the one thing we like kind of like briefly touched on in cinematography, like the talk, but it's also like a big part of directing. I think more so than even cinematography is the blocking, right? Like how the characters are going to
Hmm.
move through a space, and I think he does that very interestingly as well. Like even in the opening sequence, you're very disoriented in a sense of like how the layout of this apartment is because there all you see is like doors and empty rooms, so you don't know like what connects to what. But then there's this
Yeah,
entire
yeah, yeah.
scene kind of taking place, and you're in that scene more so than the space in a way.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah. So I
No,
think he does that very
absolutely.
creatively. I think I mean in all the various scenes throughout the film.
Hmm.
So yeah. Do we have any more? Um,
No, that was it.
okay, cool, cool.
We have some comments which I'll
Oh,
just
sweet.
read.
Yeah.
So from Kritika, she said it seemed like in many of the scenes only ambient light by normal light sources was used. Is that the case? And the way shadow and mirror reflections were used in the beginning was interesting.
Mm. So I mean,
Um,
it obviously appears like that. Um, I'm guessing since
Intentionally, right?
yeah. I'm just guessing since they shot on film and like you would need a little bit more light than just what a practical light source would give you. They definitely supplemented that with like film lighting and just like balanced it, I guess, so to speak,
Yeah.
or just like, just gave it a little bit more of a pop. Um like nowadays with digital sensors and stuff, like you can get away with just putting on a practical and just like making it to your taste and
Hmm.
getting it right. But I think back in the day of like film, I think there's 100% probability that they probably had to like add in film lights. But I mean, you can see
Yeah,
how
yeah.
successfully they've done it because it feels seamless. Like you don't feel the like heavy-handedness of lighting in this film, and they're not afraid to go dark.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just sort of like there's that sort of like natural quality to it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't feel it doesn't feel staged, or it doesn't feel sort of like put together.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and I think that's sort of like running through both films that we've seen this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so there's one more, scenes kind of framed by one second, scenes kind of framed by the door frame in this and both E reminds one of Ozu 2, which I think is definitely true.
Mm-hmm.
And then also, did the scenes with Lung in the elevator of Chin's apartment building remind anyone else of Old Boy? I didn't think of it immediately, but now that I'm reading this, it sort of does. I mean, I see it, right?
Yeah.
Like with sort of that, like the graffiti and all of that, like
Mm-hmm.
it kind of fits,
Yeah.
kind of sort of touches on that sort of feeling,
Yeah. I
that
think just
bit
because
of like
of
grunginess.
yeah, I think just because I mean maybe I just didn't draw that connection because like from a genre perspective it just feels very
Hmm.
different.
Yeah,
But like I can see that. I mean, I think Old Boy probably came after Taipei Story, right? So
possibly.
yeah, I'm pretty sure Old Boy was like 2000s and Taipei
Yeah,
Story
yeah, it
was
was. Yeah, Taipei Store is 85.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, Old Boy was yeah, 2003. So
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah, um, yeah. I definitely see that. Like
was there
I,
any other, yeah,
yeah. Any other questions or comments? I guess.
was there any other things that you were thinking about with Taipei Story? I'm just trying to like
Um,
go over the film in my head again.
yeah. Um, those are like I think the main things. I thought visually just
Yeah.
very striking. I think like
Mm.
at least like for this week, I think like at least personally found like the biggest like lesson or takeaway just in the pacing, really, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
just like how you can, you know, hold on a shot and just really let something kind of play out, and it's not, it's not about getting to the next moment, it's about letting this moment finish, I feel.
Yeah. 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 I think it's also. I mean, it's very sort of counter. Like not counterproductive, but like it's just like it's countering the point. I guess that like everybody who might have like studied storytelling, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying storytelling just like for all mediums possible, right?
Yeah.
That you sort of like every. I mean, I know like they say it specifically like in short story writing is that every sentence has to move the story forward, right?
Mm.
Um, and I think that's something that is crucial, like is really important to know and like to learn about. But I think it's also important, I guess, to understand that like that doesn't make or break your story,
Yeah.
right? Is that like if you have like because a lot of it can just be like the movies that we've seen this week is that they sort of let the scenes organically or naturally resolve themselves. I mean, we might not be happy with
Mm-hmm.
how they resolve or like how they sort of end and how they go from one to the other, but I think that sort of very like that I think that sense that it or that like emotion that it invokes is very realistic,
Yeah.
if that makes
But I
sense, is
think,
that it sort of feels like real life kind of
hmm, absolutely. And I
almost.
and I think that's a very Western way of storytelling, of,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
idea, like, and I think that's, just in general, like the cinema club has kind of shown me, is like this, like just the Eastern way of thinking, kind of like where it isn't about the
Yeah.
plot, it isn't about moving from scene to scene, it's about like kind of like really just discovering something and kind of letting that process
Yeah.
of discovery happen through your film in a way.
Exactly. Exactly.
And we kind of saw this from week one, right? That idea of Kisho Tenketsu that we kind of brought up.
Yeah. Exactly.
um so I think, it's just constantly, uh yeah, just I think it's like that, and we've seen this across the board with even other Asian countries that aren't like like films that aren't from Japan, even like, some of the
Yeah.
Korean films, like Memories of Murder, for example, comes to mind, and
Exactly.
stuff. um
Absolutely.
so I think that's been really interesting, and I think if you like start looking at some of the Asian writers, like obviously Murakami comes to mind immediately.
Yeah.
I think they
For
fall in a
sure.
similar space or a similar boat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because
And
I think that's like it's very much about um and I mean this not in sort of like a fantasy genre way, but just like in like a realistic way, that it sort of just envelops you in the world of the story,
mhm,
right? And it's not like, oh, I'm watching or like I'm reading Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter or something, where it's like a whole new world that's being created.
yeah,
um but
yeah,
but really it's sort of our world, and it's just like through a different lens maybe,
yeah.
right, that you're used to seeing, and it sort of puts you in this like mindset, in this sort of like um atmosphere, I think
Yeah,
is the
absolutely.
best.
And even with like the fantasy movies, they've done like something similar, like The Wailing, for example. For example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It it. I mean, yeah, there's a like a good amount of plot, but it's not plot. It it doesn't focus on the plot, right? Like the plot is to like reveal something else. Like the plot,
Yeah,
it isn't about the
exactly.
plot. The plot is in as a tool to do something else, something bigger. And I
Yeah.
think that's such
No,
an
I think, I
interesting
mean,
way
I
of
think
thinking about it.
that's a great way to articulate it.
Yeah. So like the plot is in service of something bigger. Um,
Hmm.
do we have any more thoughts or comments or questions from anyone?
No, I think that's about it.
Awesome. Cool. Should we start
And
diving into EE?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Cool.
I mean, I think just based on what we're saying,
Yeah.
what we're talking about now, it sort of makes it's like a perfect sort of transition or
Yeah.
segue into because it's sort of like a. I mean, it's a long film, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
especially uh, from ones that we've seen, especially from just films I think in general that you're used to seeing,
Mm-hmm.
because it's I mean it's almost just 3 hours. Um, it's like just under I think it's 2 hours and 53 minutes. Um, but you don't necessarily. I mean, I think yes, it's long, but like you don't necessarily feel that, and when it sort of ends, you end up feeling kind of. I mean, there's sort of like a strange thing. I don't want to say that like you end on the note of like I wish it didn't end, but
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of just like you're taken into these people's lives,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then it just ends.
Yeah. It's like a beautiful like ensemble piece, you know. It's just very
Yeah,
like, you have these few characters and then you have like that one layer of characters around them and it's just, kind of fits into that.
yeah.
And I loved how it kind of also captures, you know, you could say like like Taiwan in through like three different generations. I thought
Hmm.
that was very
Yeah,
cool, right? I think it's
yeah,
when you're doing three different generations, I think it's like you're capturing three different lenses, three different ways of looking at the world. Like
yeah.
my
And
favorite
also how
was
you're sort of seeing how the world is changed. Sorry.
mhm. No worries. No, I thought like the little boy's story arc was so great. Um,
Oh, it was I was so fascinated
yeah,
by just like everything he did. Um,
yeah. Sorry.
that's cool. Like especially just I think the one that like is just like I'm reminded of immediately is when he just like jumps into the pool,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And then there's just like that bit of like I guess he's struggling.
hmm
Um, and then you're like, oh, like hang on, did he like just jump into the deep end?
Yeah,
And like what happened? And then the scene's over, right?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah.
all you
I was
see.
like,
And then he's
I think I like vocally
uh,
said like, "Oh no."
yeah. I was like, wait. I was like, hang on, like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Because it's like it's so interesting. I mean, I just thought it was great. Like he like takes his bag off
hmm
and like sort of like takes everything off, like takes his shoes off, but then all of his clothes are on.
Yeah.
So like he like does so much of this work to I guess like get ready for the pool, but then sort of just like stops halfway and just like dives in very like nonchalantly, which was
Yeah, and
great.
like he comes back home and like doesn't like give a damn,
Yeah,
which is amazing too.
it was great.
And I think some of the stuff, like one of like that one moment he said, right, which was like really profound in a way, like, and I think only a kid could think of something like that, which is like we only
Yeah,
see what's in front of us, so we're seeing like half the truth.
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that's such an interesting idea. We never like, I mean, I'm sure it's like plays into like some like other Asian
Mm.
like philosophies, I guess.
Teaching
Yeah,
or
like
yeah,
probably like
yeah.
something from like what Confucius might have said, or Tao, like the Tao or something like that, right? Like other
Mm.
writings. I'm sure it's kind of in there, but like the way he kind of says it, and under the you know through the lens of like him pursuing photography in a way, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
It's like we can only see what's in front
yeah.
of us, not
And I
what's
mean, I
behind
think,
us.
and it was so. I think if I mean, it's the scene basically where his uncle like looks at the photograph, right,
Mm-hmm.
of the back of his head, and he like so nonchalantly says it. Also, like he just like turns around and like he's like walking off, like he's
Yeah,
done with this. Like he's
yeah,
giving him the photograph. He's like, yeah, and then he's like, why have you? He's like, oh, like you can't because you can't see it. That's why,
yeah.
right? And then it's so simple and like it makes sense. Like it's obvious to
Mm-hmm.
him, you
Exactly.
know,
Yeah,
which I think is great.
yeah. So that was great. Um, and I think we can. I guess we can like the other thing we can like definitely speak about for this film is like also like the pacing and the energy again. Um,
Yeah.
I think it has a very different pace from Taipei Story. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of it keeps it chugs along, throughout the film, and that's the thing. It's like
Yeah.
it may be long, it may be a little bit, it may be slow in terms of the way it plays out, but it never drags,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is
Yeah.
amazing, and it's very hard to achieve. And I think that all
I mean,
stems from the
I think it's
characters.
like a very fine line, right? Because it could very easily drag.
Yeah,
I think there are like moments where it could have gone the other way, but somehow it sort of like maintains that like tightrope very well.
yeah.
Um,
Also, I thought was really interesting is like, and I think that's because of how he has these three characters, I mean, multiple characters, but three central characters that we keep switching between.
yeah.
And like for example, like they're at the wedding, and then the son wants McDonald's, which is what causes the like dad to leave. And then when he comes back, he runs into his ex flame, um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like so it's like one leads into the other because like otherwise, you could have run into the ex flame at the wedding itself, but then it would have just been a boring way to kind of make that happen. Um,
Yeah. Exactly.
and I think that's what like keeps you, very like the story kind of pulls you along. He's like holding your hand and like walking you through it as opposed to just being like,
Yeah. Yeah.
here's the whole thing.
Next. Yeah. Like next. 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 Next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I think that was amazing. Also, like that character, I texted you this too. She kind of just reminded me of like the daughter-in-law from like Tokyo Story, just like the
Mm-hmm.
energy that she kind of brings into the film. Because like NJ's life is kind of, it seems somewhat routine, somewhat. He's trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. He's kind of, I don't want to say bored of it, but he's just like kind of in this like corporate
It's like it is. Yeah.
circle,
He's at this sort of, I guess, crucial
midlife.
point, right? Um,
Yeah,
where it's sort of like, yeah, exactly. I mean, he's not, I don't think bored is the right word, but he's sort of realizing that this is sort of it,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
And then like the way she kind of
and
just
like what
injects
next?
energy into the
Hmm.
scenes, and like that entire sequence in Tokyo was just super fun.
Yeah.
Just because like,
Also, I just loved how I mean, I think you mentioned this also, but
mhm.
like how everything that he was saying was happening with his daughter, right?
Yeah, on
Like,
that
and then
first
just
date.
and then it was just like it just like worked so nicely.
Yeah,
You know,
and I think it just
and then
like,
obviously,
go ahead.
no, I was just saying, like, obviously, it like they both end very differently, right? But like, it's sort of just like for that moment or those few moments, like you just like you're in that, and like you just like enjoy.
Hmm.
Um, you're just like a part of this.
Yeah, it also just has a certain flow to it, right? I think it's just like at first I almost thought for a second it might have been a flashback, like the first shot, and then you
Yeah,
start to
yeah, yeah.
realize what exactly is happening, and you're just like, that's just such a beautiful way of like cutting back and forth. It's like
Mm-hmm,
it kind of, and I think I remember the music also being very like great in that moment.
mm-hmm,
Just
mm-hmm.
like
I mean, I
kind
think the
of,
music in both was just fantastic.
yeah, it just like had this like, it was
Uh,
like a lyrical bridge between the two, type of two sides of the
that's a
story.
really nice way to put it.
Um, and so that also was like very very effective. I actually have the film if we want to like pull it up. Should I?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
So, just let me know. Is there any moment specifically that you want to like go to?
I'm trying to
Um,
think.
I'm trying to find. I can find that moment where. Oh, this was a great shot. Oh, did it disappear already? A second, sorry. I'm also trying to do. So like that's the other thing you can see in a lot of these shots. The camera's very much always like eye level, very
Yeah.
straight on. Um, wait, where is that shot? Okay, there, here. Um, one second, it's playing. Okay, and this moment, like where he's just standing there, and then like the silhouette, just incredible.
Yeah.
It's obviously like the frame sits in darkness, but like just this conversation, and you kind of just know what you want. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm trying to see if I can find the moment in Tokyo. This is where they named the baby. Have I gone to? Oh, here we go. Here we are in Tokyo. So maybe it's a little bit past this.
Hmm.
So this is where she kind of has that one meltdown of sorts, and he kind of is like,
Yeah.
"Do you know
Yeah.
what I went through?" Um,
And then
oh,
he sort of says the same thing.
你讲，哎、要讲话就赶快过来，我快被你急死了。
I'm trying to see if I can find the exact moment where that thing starts. Sorry.
Mhm.
可以给我个赞。
But yeah, there's also like a certain distance to it too, right? It's like we
Yeah.
almost feel like another individual in the park, kind of just seeing this other couple from a distance, but like obviously we can
Yeah.
hear them. Um, sorry. Okay. Did I go too far? Am I in the right sequence or right part of this?
I think you might have gone past the beginning if that's what you're.
I'm trying to find. Oh, is this? Yeah, this is it. Okay. So maybe 148 will be where it starts. Here we go. Um, okay, so the teacher leaves. Um, and I think it'll.
So we should talk about the endings of both
Yeah.
films afterwards.
Okay, so this is like where she's getting ready to go on this date. Um,
Mm.
Also, I love how a lot of it is frames within frames. So like it's like us looking through the door. It's kind of it has a little bit of
Yeah.
like a certain voyeurism to it. Also, like
Hmm.
looking
Hmm.
through a lot of glass panels and stuff throughout the
Yeah.
film.
Well, I think very much like, oh yeah, if you were at the house, right,
Hmm.
and then you'd like walk by,
Yeah,
I mean that's
exactly.
probably what you, if you like stopped and like lingered, like
See,
that's probably what you'd see.
like that's what's amazing. Like the character we're following has already left the frame, but it lingers and lets the other character who like extra actually enter the building.
Yeah.
Like things like that. Um, which you don't you wouldn't necessarily
You
get
don't
in
see at
Hollywood.
all. Yeah.
Um, you know what? Here, maybe what I'll do is this, just because maybe a little faster, so we can kind of go through it.
Mm.
And then in the train, perfect transition moment to like cut into this other thing. You still have the
Yeah.
narration running.
Yeah. You know what? I think that, I mean, that is like a really interesting um, thing, is that it was kind of a voiceover, but like without
Hmm.
being
See, and like we cut
like a
seamlessly.
cheap or like a corny voiceover.
Hmm. See, this is exactly what I meant. Like, you didn't know kind of which characters you were looking at because they like
Hmm.
melt
Hmm.
together. Because like the other one also, it's like you're from the train tracks up, looking down almost or something.
Yeah.
You're like there's that sort of omniscient viewpoint to it, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah. Yeah.
you cut to this. It's a wide shot, and also like from a costume standpoint, he made his daughter wear a shirt. So like when you cut to this where she's wearing a shirt, you're like, there's a certain similarity to it or a certain mirroring to it. And now you see that train again. And that's like another thing. It's like you kind
Yeah.
of have those environment like elements, and you cut to that car crossing the frame to reveal them.
Yeah, exactly.
So a whole lot of like things like that which just work so well because there's like you always feel the presence of the environment even though you're focused in on their story.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, like like again you have a train wipe across or like a little trolley,
Hmm.
and like those movements are like match cut in a way that definitely captures the essence of like a first date in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of like weird seeing it on like 2 times the speed.
Yeah, I think I put it to like 1.5 maybe, but yeah.
No, yeah, but like just sped up
Yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
little.
I don't know if there's another transition coming up, but see, even here we're like outside that space. We're not inside
Yeah, yeah.
there's the window in between us.
It's very much like watching this unfold
Mm-hmm.
in real life.
Yeah.
And I mean that's something that I think was in Taipei story a lot,
Mm-hmm.
was that like I think that like big building, right, when she's at work and they're like walking to the elevator or the lift,
Yeah.
and like they're like really far out,
Mm-hmm.
right, but like you can hear them, the dialogue and everything, as if they're very close by.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
so I think that was something that was like really interesting.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And I'm just trying to think. Yeah, and I guess what would also be good or like interesting to talk about is um just the endings of both films,
Yeah.
right? Because they are sort of unexpected, to say the least,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like in the end, um, of Taipei story, Lung sort of is on his way home,
Mm-hmm.
and then he like confronts that guy who's stalking Chin, and then
Mm-hmm.
he follows that bike on his motorbike. He like follows him in the cab, and then they get out and have a bit of a fight, and then he's like, okay, this is done, and walks off, and then like they get into another altercation, and then later we see that he was like stabbed
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah.
and like he doesn't realize either.
Yeah.
um and then obviously in Yi we find out that like this boyfriend kills the English teacher,
Mm-hmm.
and also we found out that the English teacher is having a having a had a relationship with both the girl and the mother,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which sort of, I don't know if you saw that, and maybe I just missed it, but like I didn't pick up on that. I thought it's just the mother.
Yeah, that's what I picked up on too originally. And I was like, it caught me by surprise. Um, I
Yeah,
know exactly what you're
but
talking
it was like
about.
it was very like matter of fact in both the films. I feel,
Yeah, no, there's no like.
it was just like, oh, this has happened, like okay,
Mhm.
and then sort of everyone else kind of just like goes on
Yeah,
with their lives.
maybe that's kind of like his way of commenting with modern society, where like these things kind of just happen and we just move on, right?
Yeah,
And that's like
yeah, no, for sure.
in the big building, like for example, like you have that couple that's fighting in the beginning and the son's like, oh, I heard them
Yeah.
fighting or whatever. um but
Hmm.
then like the dad's like, yeah, you know what, it doesn't matter, like it's fine, it's their life type of a thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's kind of, and like I've kind of like said this about like New York City, right? It's like you don't even know your neighbors and you don't really care to know your neighbors. Like you meet them
exactly.
once in a while and that's about it. Like in a building, especially when you're like in apartments or flats.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Uh,
mean, you don't even like you rarely know people living like on the other side of a wall to you.
yeah, so that sense of community is like kind of like, I guess, lost with that modernization, and it becomes about the
Yeah.
individual unit, and I think that's kind of maybe where he's like starting to like lean into, and I think you see. Do you see something similar? I'm just wondering if there's something similar like that in Taipei story, specifically. Um,
Not as sort of explicitly, I don't
yeah,
think.
yeah. I don't think it's as explicit.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, I think there's very much like that abandoned flat that Chin goes to, right, where
Hmm.
sort of like all of these kids are hanging out,
Yeah.
um, which is kind of the opposite of this.
Right.
Um, so that's that kind of it,
Hmm.
showing another side to it, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have any
But that, I mean, that
questions?
was like wild though. Like I was in Taipei store
Oh
particularly. Like I
yeah.
was not expecting that,
Yeah. Also,
and then I
like,
was like,
there was no hint of it.
and it was kind of nice that, yeah, exactly. There was no hint at all, and it was kind of nice. I felt like it was a nice touch in that moment where he sort of like looks at that like abandoned TV set,
Yeah.
right, and then like imagines a baseball game. It was like a very poignant moment.
Yeah. It's kind of like, it's almost like his final moments, right? And it's like he's dying and he's
Yeah.
confronting, like, kind of like, I mean, I don't know if baseball's as big in Taiwan anymore, but it's kind of like, I mean, maybe for him it's like the old days, right? Like looking back to like those glory days of like playing baseball and stuff.
Maybe, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Very much. It could, that possibly could be. I'm not sure about
Hmm.
that, but I know that it's sort of very like it is very popular like in East Asia,
Yeah, in Japan for sure,
yeah, in
and
Japan
Korea as well.
absolutely.
Japan and
Mm,
Korea. Um,
yeah.
so yeah. Do we have any questions or thoughts from anyone about E?
None right now. I mean, we can just hang for a
Hang for a
bit.
second, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, and like if there are questions, we can just take them.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. With Yeah, that's an interesting point that was brought up just now. It's like the end of
mhm,
Yi with Ting Ting remembering her, like almost imagining her grandma was alive. That was actually a great moment
mhm,
too, kind of, because like it kind of starts with the grandma going into the coma and then ends with her
yeah,
death.
and then sort of yeah,
And you have
yeah,
like all these like, I think it's interesting because you have all these like life moments throughout the film. Like you have a birth, you have a death, you have a marriage, you have a start of a relationship, you have a revisiting of a relationship, you have the
yeah,
mother who's going through her own like kind of story. You have the
yeah.
boy through school.
Very much off screen.
Yeah, like you have the boy going through like elementary school, you have the girl going through
Mm,
like high school, you have the father in his midlife crisis, you have the recently married
yeah,
couple. Um, so you have like all these like kind of like the whole range from like birth
yeah,
through death, which is like really interesting. Um, yeah, um, kind of captures, yeah, it just captures such a wide array of moments.
yeah. I mean, it's like it's sort of like almost all possible
Hmm.
in like occurrences, right? Or like
Yeah.
I guess big moments that
Hmm.
you might have or might experience.
Yeah. Um, do you want to announce next week's films while we wait for questions?
Yeah, we can. We can. Let me just look up
Hmm.
from the bring up the list. Um,
Like,
so next week is week 13,
yeah.
and we're still in Taiwan. I'm not entirely like
Is it Hao
sure how to
Xiaoxian?
pronounce. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So
Hao Xiaoxian.
interesting
And
fact.
the films are The Time to Live and The Time to Die, and Dust in the Wind.
And so cool thing about Hao Xiaoxian, guys, is that he's the actor who played Lung.
Oh, okay,
So
nice.
it's the perfect bridge.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I believe he was also like he's also a screen like he started off kind of I don't know I don't know what came first, what came later, but he's like an actor, screenwriter, director, and so he's like one of the most prominent directors from Taiwan. So
Yeah, I mean, I've
we've kind of
definitely heard
already been
his name.
introduced
That's
to him
amazing.
technically.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be really exciting to kind of see, you know, and I mean I'll see if I can find some interviews online or something to figure out like what came first, what came after, if the directing informed the acting process or the other way around, like being an actor informs the directorial process. But we'll see what we
Yeah.
can find. I think it'll be interesting. Because from what I understand and what it seems like the Taiwanese film circuit is very small and very close, and they're all kind of
Yeah.
working together.
So I mean, basically, I just checked up his like IMDb credits, and the acting credits are all like. So his first directorial credit was in 1980.
Okay, so a little bit later on, I guess.
And then the acting is just sort of in between. So it starts in 83, 84, Taipei Story in 85, and then 86. And then after that, he doesn't act, well, according to IMDb, until 2013.
Oh wow. Okay. Interesting.
So he's only got five acting credits.
Okay. Fair. So he's
as
mostly a
opposed to
director.
22 and 23 director and writer producer credits.
Yeah. Yeah. So that'll be really exciting. Do we have any more questions from anyone or thoughts?
Yeah, there's one from Kritika. I'm just opening it up. She said, there was something odd I felt in Taipei Story where the two are talking around the table while talking about his brother-in-law. Frame suddenly focuses on the watercolor painting behind them. I was just looking at the painting while Lung speaks, followed by his close-up. And there's also these shots with movie posters and colonial architecture that was nice in Taipei.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that you see him kind of do every once in a while is he'll sometimes as a transition, sometimes as a moment, kind of what we talked about with that shot of where it's like in the room and you just see the shadows in the background. I don't know if he's necessarily like trying to make a very specific statement out of it, but I think it's just like a way of, you know, going into a scene or going out of a scene, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And you never know. Sometimes like things like that end up becoming like clever solutions because sometimes you don't have what you wanted, like you don't have it in the can when you shoot, and you're like in the editorial process maybe you find something and you're like, hey, maybe we need to add. I mean, I'm not saying this is the case with this director, but like I've seen cases where it's like, okay, we show this like insert of something else but then add a line of dialogue to end the scene, and that like finishes the scene perfectly because it's just not working in the edit, so there's some moments like that you never know what it could be, but like it could be something like that as well, where it's just kind of like a fix to something that might not be working.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's
yeah, sounds good.
That's a wrap.
Yep. All right. So
cool.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
Yep. Bye.